Certainty of death, small chance of success.
Wrong one.
He's looking at you, kids.
I wish I knew how to quit you.
Bond.
This seems so
James Bond.
There's no place like home.
I'm gonna make him an offer down with you.
That's the right one.
Hey, welcome to Gone with the Wind. Yes, I played the wrong intro because I'm an idiot. But we're here to talk about horror movies. We will have a guest in a bit. He was held up with some personal business he had to take care of, but he'll be here at some stage. But we've got Dan here. Dan, how's it going?
Great. You know, I studied this topic, Malcolm, all day today when I wasn't writing reviews, and hopefully I got some insight on this topic. It's fascinating looking up this type of stuff because we don't really think of horror movies in the realm of the Academy Awards, but there is a history of them.
And Luis, how are you feeling today?
I'm doing pretty good. Halloween weekend. Halloween's happening tomorrow as we record this, my favorite holiday of the year. So I've been really enjoying the spooky seasons and such. And even though as we eventually, I guess we're about to talk about soon enough about the movies we've seen, it was kind of weird that I did see a Christmas movie over Halloween weekend. But yeah, I'm doing all right.
Yeah, it's one of those ones like it definitely is like very interesting. When I was doing some quick research sort of yesterday, like only six horror movies in history have ever been nominated for Best Picture. Like, well, a lot of other ones have been nominated in various other places, like categories, but yeah, it's just astounding that they just don't get a lot of love. But Dan, what did you watch in the past week?
Well, I'm going back 2 weeks, Malcolm. I'm going to go back 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, I watched probably one of the best foreign films of the year. It's half English, half French, but it can't be nominated for international feature because France didn't nominate it. But people are actually seeing The Taste of Things, and people are raving about The Taste of Things, France's submission for the international feature. But this has probably got a good chance of getting into the Best Picture race, and that's Anatomy of a Fall, starring Sandra Hüller, based on a story that is about a person falls to their death, and then there's this whole investigation and subsequent court hearing regarding this case. Very good film. I think Sandra Hüller is incredible in it. There's a little kid in it. I forget his name. He's amazing in it. I recommend everybody see it. I think it's an incredible movie, Anatomy of a Fall. Also, I have seen a lot of press screenings. Some of them I'm embargoed for, but I saw The Killer, which my review is out, and I love The Killer. I don't know what people, I love the details in some of these type of films, and I think David Fincher really is the devil in the details, where the moving around, moving your hand, driving here, lifting this, putting this here, and then there's like all these Easter eggs of old television characters in there. And I just think Michael Fassbender is incredible. I would watch a movie of him as this character for 5 hours, let alone two hours or whatever it was, a little under 2 hours. I just think he's so just magnanimous as this character, the killer. And then David Fincher hasn't done a film that's in theaters in a while. And I'm glad The Killer got a little bit of a theatrical release from Netflix. Netflix is kind of coming over to the light side here with this, getting their movies in the theater so they can get awards coverage for them. So I recommend The Killer quite a bit. Five Nights at Freddy's I wasn't a big fan of Friday, but I'll tell you what, it's about halfway through, I was still intrigued by it. And then it just kind of let me down towards the end with the same old horror tropes we've seen so many times before. You see the villain coming a mile away. You see this mystery character. You're like, I wonder what she's got to do with this. And then, she's got something to do with it, and she has a history. back history and stuff. Josh Hutcherson, I haven't seen him in much, but I'm not a fan of that video game, so I wasn't really up on the whole lore of Five Nights at Freddy's. But so I was intrigued for about halfway, and then it just fell into so many horror tropes that I'm just about fed up with by the end of it. So I didn't give it a good review. I gave it like a 2.5 stars. Also, I saw Rustin, which is Coleman Domingo, his first of his multiple movies that he's got coming out possibly. I think Sing Sing's pushed to next year. They are not going to put Sing Sing out this year. But Rustin, I'll tell you right now, this is kind of a paint by numbers biopic of a civil rights activist and stuff. But what elevates it to the next level is Coleman Domingo's performance as Bernard Rustin, and he's incredible. If he's not in the 5 for Academy Awards for Best Actor, I'll be shocked. Come next year, I know Malcolm. Oh, you never know. I know how you are, Malcolm. You're gonna put me in my place. I know how you are. But I'll tell you what, Coleman Domingo is incredible. He's got a subplot going on in this movie besides the stuff regarding the civil rights activism and this march that he's trying to create. Very, very good movie based off of Coleman Domingo's performance. I've seen a couple movies that my embargo is on Wednesday. Squealer, a horror movie. I thought, maybe this will be interesting, where the guy kills a bunch of hookers and feeds them to his pigs. I thought that'll be kind of bad acting, just terrible. Ronnie James, Gene Blevins, we've seen him in 3 or 4 different things. He's just not a good actor, but add in Tyrese Gibson and Theo Rossi and some of these people, and they're all just terrible in Squealer. Oh my God, I couldn't believe how bad this was. I was hoping for something better because it was Halloween, The Marsh King's Daughter even it didn't let me down in a way. It let me down as bad because it's Daisy Ridley and Ben Mendelsohn and Garrett Hedlund. You think, this is going to be good. But once again, it doesn't go to the places I wanted to go. I think Ben Mendelsohn was miscast. I know that's weird, right? Ben Mendelsohn is miscast or something. He plays the father of this little girl. They live in the woods, and then there's a twist happening after the first act, and he ends up getting arrested and sent to prison. And then she has to grow up as an adult, and she raises her own daughter and stuff. Helena is her name, Daisy Ridley's. And Brooklyn Prince, very good young actress. She was in the Florida Project. She plays the little Helena. But yeah, it just didn't go to the places I wanted. I thought it should have had a little bit more go to the next level, and it just didn't do it. The Marsh King's Daughter. I've been watching documentaries out the Yin Yang because I'm using the Doc New York Film Festival, and I finally got a chance to see Beyond Utopia. Oh my God, is that incredible? If this thing doesn't get, I know we're always, the best documentary never gets nominated. Well, this and 20 Days in Mariupol are probably the 2 best documentaries right now. So I think one of them is probably going to get snubbed come the Oscars, because that's what always happens every freaking year, which is ridiculous. But unbelievable story of these people that are trying to escape North Korea into South Korea, but it's such an arduous journey. Some people don't make it. Very, very good. I cannot say enough about this documentary. Another documentary I saw, Who Shot the Piano Player, is an animated foreign documentary. So we got Flea again, all over again, except this is a Latin story set in like Latin America, like Venezuela, and places like that, Brazil, and countries like that, and it's about this guy named Jeff, voiced by Jeff Goldberg, ironically enough, who is writing a book, but he ends up getting wrapped up in this story of this jazz musician, piano player, and it just takes him all over the kind of South America and middle America and stuff. But it's animated. Oh my God, the animation's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful animation. I recommend They Shot the Piano Player if you haven't seen that. Also, I saw. I finished watching it today. Fingernails. I mean, people have been talking about Fingernails. It's got Riz Ahmed, Jesse Buckley, Jeremy Allen White from The Bear, and it's like a takeoff on The Lobster in a way. It's about this woman. She's looking for a job, and she ends up working for this love academy where they bring in these people and they do all these tests and these studies on these people to find out compatibility and whatnot, if they should be married, if they should be together. And then the last thing that they do is they cut their fingernails off and they put them in a machine and then analyze them, whether these people are compatible or not. I'll tell you, I mean, I felt kind of sad for some of the characters in the movie, but I just felt like it was just not that good of a movie overall. I don't know what other people have been saying about it. I just didn't like it that much. And I, with the cast, I'm like, dang, this cast is pretty good. And then it's got Luke Wilson. He runs the company, but I think I've talked about enough. So I think I'm going to hand it off to the next person.
Yeah. Just very quickly on your note about Rustin, I think that's going to depend on a few things because as I said to you at the, last night in the Rankum a lot, Netflix has a lot of movies that they're pushing, so it's probably going to depend on what ones sort of stand out and all that, and it's all probably also going to depend on Color Purpose. Like as we've said before, there is a chance he could be in both supporting and best actor this year, but so it's probably going to depend on which one has the strong performances. If there's a lot of people vying for that best actor slot, then Colman Domingo might miss out but get supporting, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
but
I'm with you on that. I just think Leo's starting to lose his luster. That's just my 2 cents.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, I haven't seen Killers of the Flower Moon, so I can't sort of talk on that. But I think it's going to depend on how the critics groups and stuff start when we start getting these Guild nominations and all that. We're going to talk about the Gotham nominations next week, but not that. I don't know if Rustin qualifies for the Gothams or not. Maybe. But Louis, what did you watch in the past week?
Well, like Dan, I'll mention stuff that goes back 2 weeks, but I'll try to keep it short, and I won't really mention necessarily everything because I've been watching a lot of Halloween movies now that we're getting to the nitty gritty here of spooky season. I mean, I caught up with the old Hammer films, the old Hammer recreations of Frankenstein and Dracula and such. I went ahead and caught some 30s classics like The Old Dark House, James Whale movie. Also, The Black Cat, which is a movie that stars both Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff. I also went ahead and caught the original Halloween. I went ahead and also watched Halloween 4. John Carpenter's The Thing, one of my old-time favorite horror films. Hellraiser, which is a personal favorite of mine. House of Usher, not to be confused with the big Netflix hit, but the 1960 film with Vincent Price, Roger Corman film, I believe, and Rocky Horror Picture Show, one of my favorite musicals. A very wacky movie, but I love the soundtrack in it. In terms of new stuff, I did catch Killers of the Flower Moon 2 weeks ago, and I really liked it. I think I liked it a little bit more than you did, Dan, but I do think personally, and I'm definitely going to give the movie a rewatch again before the end of the year, I do feel like I felt the length of the movie eventually, because it's definitely more of a slow burn. And I happen to have watched Oppenheimer before, rewatched Oppenheimer before I saw Killers of the Flower Moon. And even though Oppenheimer is 3 hours long, just like the first watch, I didn't feel it as much because it's a movie that there's constant momentum going on. I mean, even when they're sitting around talking about physics and how they're going to build this bomb, there's still this exciting momentum going on, whereas Killers takes its time. I do think watching the movie that obviously we got to see what happens with Ryan Gosling playing Ken and with Barbie. But I think that RDJ's biggest problem at the moment could be Robert De Niro, because he really stands out as the main villain in this movie. He's not playing the typical De Niro role. He's got the accent and everything. Lily Gladstone is great in the movie. I will say that I felt like she was a little bit more of a supporting role, but I'm not going to get that caught up in the fact that she's running lead. I do think that she does a great performance. I wouldn't be too surprised, especially if the movie goes farther than some of us might think, if she does happen to be maybe the movie's only big win the night of, if she can catch fire, especially with that narrative that she'll be the first ever Native American to be nominated in that category. I did see also The Holdovers this past weekend, ironically, because it's a Christmas movie. I really enjoyed this movie. Now, I do really want to rewatch it because I was a little taken aback that it was a little bit more bittersweet than I thought it would be, because we kept hearing about how it was this big crowd pleaser. And it is a crowd pleaser. There are jokes in there. I laughed plenty of times. But it does have some melancholy moments. The ending is pretty bittersweet, and it's going to be interesting to me to see if this gets as far in the preferential as we might be assuming. Like, watching it, I can see why maybe something like American Fiction, which is more of a straight up comedy, was able to beat it at Toronto. But I would really like to rewatch it or really get my feelings on the movie. At the moment, I'm not going to say that's a top 10 of the year for me. But again, I want to watch it, and I want to watch it with my folks and see what they think, because I think this is a movie that the older voters are really going to respond to. And also I caught Quiz Lady, which is coming out on Hulu, and I caught that today via screening that Disney sent me, and it was actually a pretty fun movie. It's very predictable comedy about these two sisters and trying to make it to a quiz show to make money to save one of the sisters' dogs who were kidnapped by some drug guys who their mom owes money to. But the chemistry between Sandra Oh and Aquafina was really good, and I think elevated the film, and I found it very funny and very fun. Nothing special, nothing that stands out, but a really fun film. And finally, I caught Pain Hustlers, and this movie's been getting a lot of rough reviews. I have to say, I can see why, because it's a very generic, based on a true story type of movie. But I still think there was enough there to be somewhat informative and somewhat entertaining. It's a movie that I can see kind of being forgettable, but I don't want to say that I outright disliked it. Oh, and finally, I did also see Five Nights at Freddy's as well. I got to tell you, I disliked it more than you did, Dan. I really hated this film. I was bored to tears by it. I kept waiting for it just feels like they were trying to do so much. And it got to the point where the movie just lost me. Now, I will say the animatronics look cool. I thought the animatronics look cool, but other than that, it's one of my least favorite movies of the year. But it looks like we're getting a sequel because it did really well at the box office, even with Peacock having a same-day streaming. So, that's what I caught over the last 2 weeks.
And Malcolm, I got two more real quick. I did see The Holdovers. I'm glad you brought that up, Lewis. I saw The Holdovers, and I'll tell you right now, I think Paul Giamatti is incredible in this. He is so funny, and he acts opposite Divine Joy Randolph and Dominic Sessa, this kid who they found out of nowhere. They found him at one of these academies in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and they got a bunch of kids, and they found this kid, and he just was incredible. I thought he was amazing. Divine Joy Randolph is amazing. I think she's got a shot at Best Supporting Actress getting nominated. I think that category is slam packed. But I'll tell you right now, this is the best movie in years for Alexander Payne. I love this movie. I felt it felt like I was watching a movie that was actually going on in the 1970s. It had that aesthetic to it, the cars, the clothes, the wintry feel of it. I mean, I was just like, wow.
Even the pacing of the story
Yeah,
felt like a 1970s movie.
yeah. I felt like I went into a time machine and went back to 1970, and this movie was taking place. It was that good of a movie for me. I think this is a definite Best Picture contender. Paul Giamatti is going to get his first Best Actor nomination, I feel. I'd be shocked if he didn't. Also, Sly, the documentary on Netflix about Sylvester Stallone. Very good, in-depth documentary. He goes into how his career started, how he got Rocky off the ground, how he came to the project of First Blood, and then some of the problems he had later on in his career, and finally getting the role with Robert De Niro, one of his idols, and Harvey Keitel and Ray Liotta in Copland. Very good documentary. Not a great documentary. Kind of not a lot of talking heads. A lot of archival footage and stuff like that, which was good. And that's going to be on Netflix this Friday. So if you haven't seen, if you're looking forward to Sly, that'll be on Netflix this Friday. And I think Holdover is going to be in more theaters as the weeks go by. So keep an eye out for the Holdovers as the weeks go by, going in more and more theaters. Sorry, Malcolm. I wanted to get those two in there.
Well, can I ask Dan just real quick in terms of Sly? Because obviously we had the Arnold docu-series earlier from Netflix. Does this feel kind of like almost like a truncated version of that? Because obviously Stallone, I don't think he didn't do the bodybuilding and the politics and stuff like Arnold did. So is that what this kind of feels like?
Yeah, it is. But it really goes into how he started his career, his father, problems with his father. Is how he went to fame and his brother did not, but it has Schwarzenegger in there, and he talks about how those two were rivals in Hollywood and with their careers and stuff like that, and he started pumping iron just to kind of match Arnold a little bit. Yeah, I mean, it's like a younger brother, a smaller brother to the Arnold series, I would guess you would say. Yeah.
But very quickly, Louis, were you familiar with the Five Nights at Freddy's games, or before going in, or not really?
So, admittedly, I'm familiar with it, but I wasn't familiar with like the deep lore of it. So, from what I've understand, from what I've been told, is that some of the things that happen as the movie goes on, goes into like deep lore that like the sequels start getting into, and I can respect that for the fans, but I feel like they could have done a better job into getting more casuals to understand the lore. But I am familiar with the game and the whole idea of like being in the dark, shining the light on the animatronics as they come at you and stuff like that.
Yeah. No, the reason I asked is I think it's one of those ones I think like a lot of people have seen raving about it are the fans, and that's why I'm not surprised that it did decent at the box office, because like of course the fans are going to go see them at that movie. Like it's one of those ones.
It's got great audience scores, I will admit that.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those ones. I wish with some of those movies, like I wish they do a good job of actually explaining it to people who may not be familiar with the game, just want to see a good movie. But I haven't seen it yet. I'll probably get to it eventually. But anyway, yeah, I didn't watch a lot of like 2023 movies this week. Like I caught up on a couple. Like I finally got around to watching the Boogeyman. Because that recently dropped on Disney Plus last week. And I thought it was a pretty good movie. Like it's kind of in the middle of there, but I think it was a decent home movie. And I also finally got around to watching A Man Called Otto yesterday, and I liked it. It's pretty good. And yeah, it probably won't be in my top 10 though. I think it's been a strong year. It's one of those ones like when I do my top 10 list, I always count it if it's a wide release in this year, which A Man Called Otto was, because like it literally was on the cusp of New Year's. That, but yeah. So I mean, before we get into the main topic, I'm not going to do a big discussion about this. Just because for one, it's kind of redundant at this point. We will talk about the Gotham Awards nominations next week. But on the side note, like it's looking like we might get some kind of resolution to the SAG strike this week because it's with the stuff that's been coming out with some SAG and all that is looking positive, but there's not really much to talk about there. Some movies have been delayed to 2025, such as Elio, Snow White, and Dead Reckoning Part 2. There's and Magazine Dreams has been taken off the schedule indefinitely, but whether or not that's because they've got something to release next year, or it may just think it's probably a bit of both. But going to move into the main topic now of horror movies. So for the first part, I thought we'd talk about some of these horror movies that actually were nominated at the Oscars. So I'm just going to go movie by movie and just talk about them. So Silence of the Lambs is probably one of the bigger one that was nominated and won a lot. It was nominated for Best Picture, Director, Actor, Actress, Adapted Screenplay. It won the Big Five, and then it was also nominated for Best Sound and Film Editing. But Dan, what are your thoughts about Silence of the Lambs? And yeah,
I mean, I think it's a great film, and I remember seeing it when I was a kid, like upper teen, like 17, 18 in that, or maybe, and like I heard this criticism about it, that it's not a horror movie, it's a thriller. And I mean, look, there's killing, there's murders, there's a serial killer in it, and there's a cannibal. Anthony Hopkins plays a cannibal. I think there's enough horror elements in it to describe it as a horror. And I don't know why people want to make a big deal about saying it's not a horror movie, but I think it's a horror. I think it's really scary towards the end when she's going to Bill. I keep saying Bill the Butcher, but it's not Bill the Butcher. It's Bill.
Buffalo Bill.
Buffalo, that's it. Buffalo Bill's house, and seeing all the crazy stuff he's got at his house and stuff. I mean, this guy's a wild, wacky man. He rips off their faces and stuff like that, or whatever he does to them, and he's trying to create like a human body or whatever, a skin body or a skin costume or whatever. That's some crazy stuff. But I think it's a great movie. I think it stands up as a great film, and I love Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins in it. So I think it's incredible.
And Lewis, what are your thoughts about Silence of the Lambs?
Well, obviously a classic, one of the great films, and definitely one of the more mainstream Best Picture winners. And I think only one of three movies that had, I believe, pulled off to win the Big Five. Even Everything Everywhere All at Once didn't pull that off, and it won the most above the line Oscars in history. And you know, it's bringing this movie up. This was the last movie before Everything Everywhere All at Once. It was like out. You could go out and see it in public when the last Oscar ceremony was happening. It was able to go wire to wire because that was an early year release. Yeah, and it just ended. And so clearly they weren't thinking this was going to be an Oscar contender when they came out with this, and I don't blame them. I mean, but it is an interesting winner, especially since a lot of people got to remember it went up against Beauty and the Beast. You know, you have this horror film going up against the first ever animated movie to get nominated for Best Picture. And the performances are great. Now I will say though, Dan, I do think there is an argument to be made that it is a thriller and not as much of a horror film, which I think is one of the big things that helped it win picture, because we do know the Academy has a bias against horror films. So the fact that it had those aspects of the detective story, the caper, the whodunit, and tracking down the killer and such like that, I think that helped it not to be seen as this horror film to dismiss when it eventually became the big hit that it was with award season. It definitely has horror elements. I just think there are other films that have been nominated, and we'll talk about that. I think are more straight up horror in comparison. But yeah, this is definitely one of the more mainstream picture winners, and one of the great classics of the genre.
Yeah, this is for me, this is I'm still yet to actually see Silence of the Lambs. May have seen it once. I don't remember watching it personally, but it's one of those ones like I've seen the trailer, and just from the trailer, I don't really get horror vibes from it. To me, it's more of a crime drama just from the trailer. And it's one of those like, well, yes, there is murder and horrifying stuff involved in the story. Like I know the story well enough, but I mean, it's one of those ones by that by that logic, you'd have to argue Seven is a horror movie too, for that same reason. Which I also don't really. I really don't think Seven's a horror movie. That once again, that's a crime drama, but it is what it is. I don't really have these in any particular order. It's just
I have them in order
but-
if you want to.
I really probably going in order.
Oh, okay.
But moving on, we're going to go to Get Out. And that was nominated for Best Picture, Director, Actor, and Original Screenplay. But Luis, what are your thoughts about Get Out?
Oh yeah, one of my favorite films from that year, and another film that came out super early, and the strength of it just carried it on throughout the entire year. And one screenplay, so it did pick up one of the big above the line Oscars. And I believe it did pretty well with critics. Various critics groups actually went ahead and gave it Best Picture that year because of the year where critics were like really divided on whether do we award Lady Bird, do we award Get Out, and then eventually, as we all saw, it became Shape of Water versus Three Billboards. But yeah, I love the fact that this movie also plays as a comedy. I love Little Ray Howard's character, as he really is sort of like the audience in the movie. He really plays that role. And it's interesting that if I don't know how many people know this, that originally the movie was actually going to have a little bit more of a bleaker, more of a social commentary ending. But then they ended up changing it, and I think it's for the better that they changed it to a little bit more of a happy, I guess you could say, an ending in comparison, because I think that helped the movie connect with audiences even better, so they can leave the theater happy. Yeah, definitely one of the great modern day horror films. I will say that I wouldn't call it my favorite horror movie from 2017 because I'm such a massive fan of the It adaptation that came out that year. But yeah, one of those films that was able to really get past the genre bias and be get a lot of recognition at the Oscars, and I think rightfully so. Because for me personally, it's still, in my opinion, Jordan Peele's best movie. Though I know there's a lot of passion out there for us, and no, but for me, it's still my favorite movie of his.
Yeah, we will talk about that the It adaptation later in a different part of that we're going to talk about. But yeah, I think Get Out is an interesting movie. It's one of those ones that I'm actually surprised it didn't get more nominations. Like I was for sure, like I think the set design and all that was great, and I even think the cinematography was pretty good as well. It's one of those movies that I think should have got more love at the Oscars. But just once again, it getting nominated for Best Picture, I think it makes sense. It is pretty good, and it was a pretty strong lineup. So it was like, as soon as it was nominated, like, yes, probably going to struggle to actually win. But yeah. But Dan, what are your thoughts about Get Out?
Yeah, I saw this in a press screening with a packed crowd of people, and it was just everybody was reacting to all the craziness. And I'll tell you what, Daniel Kaluuya was incredible in this movie. I mean, Stephen Root, I love Stephen Root. He's in Barry, and he's in some other things. He's one of these character actors. You say, "Oh, I know that guy," and you don't remember his name, but now that he's been in Barry and he's in this, you start to remember Stephen Root is a really good character actor, and he's brilliant in this. Catherine Keener, Bradley Whitfield from The West Wing. But Lil Rel Howery, go ahead, what'd you say?
No, I was just West Wing.
The West Wing. But Lou Rohari really brings this thing home because he's the audience, like Lewis said, and he's us watching. Don't go in there. What did I tell you about that? It's like, and it's he's so funny. He's basically parlayed a whole career off of that character in that movie, and he keeps getting roles and things because of how amazing he was in that role in that movie, you know. And then he was just great. He was just great in the movie, and I love the movie. I'm glad it won screenplay and I'm glad that it helped Jordan Peele become a regular director that we look forward to seeing his films, you know. And I'm going to bring up you know, at least one of his films later on before we hopefully go off the air here. So but yeah, I love Get Out.
But yeah, the next one we're going to move on is the movie that is just called In China, He's a Ghost. The Sixth Sense. Yeah, no, I'm kidding. One of the foreign translations for The Sixth Sense somehow translates to just He's a Ghost, which apparently China does not like twists. But fun fact, Pretty Woman in China is known as I'll marry a prostitute to save money. But anyway,
they just spoil these movies in these titles.
yeah. But yeah, The Sixth Sense. It was nominated for 6 awards. I didn't put down the categories it was nominated for. This one. I think there's another one that was Best Picture. I know that much. But yeah, The Sixth Sense is one of those movies that's like, yeah, I mean, this is the one that a lot of people tend to go to, and they always say it's like it's M. Night Shyamalan's best movie. Like some people say that, some people say Split. But yeah, it's just one of those movies which is a very big enigma. Yeah, it was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Supporting Actor, Haley Joel Osment, Best Supporting Actress, Toni Collette, Original Screenplay, and Best Film Editing. I mean, some of those I think it should have won. I don't entirely remember what those up against, but I think like there was an argument. I think Haley Joel Osment was so good in the movie that I think he should have won Supporting Actor that year. And it's just one of those ones that I think is just a really interesting movie. And I think and it's one that like I can watch it multiple times and still get surprised by the twist, even though I know it's coming. But Dan, what are your thoughts about The Sixth Sense?
Yeah, I saw this back in 1999 when it came out on with a bunch of football coaches in a packed theater, and everybody was on the edge of their seat. They were shocked at the twist. It didn't surprise. Nobody saw the twist coming. It was a legitimate, shocking moment for people in that audience when they watched this movie, and people were walking out like, "What the hell did I just watch? What a crazy scenario that was." And it's still one of my favorite films of the year. I would say, you know, we always do like revisionist here, 10, 20, 30 years later. We think to ourselves, okay, what has held up? What hasn't held up? And I think American Beauty hasn't really held up. The Cider House Rules really hasn't held up as far as films that people go back to and talk about. Like Michael Caine, yeah, we all mock Michael Caine on Michael Caine. But dude, the movie that we go back to is The Sixth Sense. And it's Haley Joel Osment. And I still think if there ever was a tie, and I want to go back and change history, because if there ever was a tie in the Academy Awards, I wish it was that year. I wish it was a tie in Best Supporting Actor, and I wish it was Michael Clarke Duncan and Haley Joel Osment winning. I think that would have been the greatest dichotomy ever in the history of the Academy. With this giant 6'6" black guy and this little 3 foot, 4 foot, whatever little white kid, both winning Best Supporting Actor the same year. I still wish that could have happened. There could have been a tie, and but Haley Joel Osment. I mean, I love this movie. I could go on and on about this, and I did comment on Picture This. They did 1999. Malcolm, Picture This did, and I put Sixth Sense as my winner, and I put Haley Joel Osment as my top actor. When I commented on this month's episode, because our friends Dylan and Chad and Chad's wife Carrie did Picture This, their show about revisitation of the Academy Awards, and I commented on what I think should have been Best Picture that year. That's The Sixth Sense, with Haley Joel winning Best Actor, well, Supporting Actor, but in their character they do actor Best Actor.
Yeah, and very very quickly, like just I'm kind of surprised Haley Joel Osment was Best Supporting Actor, because in my opinion he is the lead, arguably one of the lead actors in Sixth Sense. Well, yes, like Bruce Willis's character is probably the main character, but I would argue that Haley Joel Osment is more of a lead than Bruce.
That was probably a campaign strategy by the studio, thinking Bruce Willis is the bigger name, so we'll try to get him into actor. But obviously, it wasn't. He didn't get in, so you know.
Yeah, and yeah, we'll definitely get into that when we do the next part, because I do think Bruce Willis should be nominated, because it's one of those ones like looking at the nominations actor is, and actually we'll talk about it now because we are talking about the Sixth Sense while we're here. Is I have no idea what the movie's Sweet and Lowdown is, so I don't know what that movie is.
It's a musical. It's a period musical, like in the South, I believe, with Sean Penn. Is Sean Penn in it?
Yeah. Well, he was the one that he was nominated for Best Actor for that.
Yeah, it's a weird like a folk musical type of thing. I believe. Have you seen it, Lewis?
No, I didn't even know this movie existed.
Yeah. I think it's a folk musical type of thing. Malcolm, don't quote me, people that are out there. Don't quote me. Don't rip my head off if I'm wrong. I forget.
Well, I mean, it's a Woody Allen, like it's a based on just what I'm briefly saying is like it's an American comedy drama mockumentary written. It's a Woody Allen movie anyway. It's based on Federico Fellini's movie La Strada. So yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it sounds interesting.
Was it like a comedic take on that sad movie?
I got the Strata right behind on Criterion.
I mean, it's a good movie, but it's sad.
Well, I mean, I don't know much about the original one, but like it just says it's comedy drama. Maybe it's like one of those ones that's like more dramedy than comedy, like drama than comedy, but who knows? Anyway, and I mean, The Straight Story I've heard of, and
great movie.
Yeah. I mean,
well deserved for Richard Farnsworth for Best Actor. Yeah. Well deserved, Malcolm.
But Louis, what are your thoughts about Sixth Sense?
Oh yeah, well, this is definitely one of those more modern day horror classics. Even though it's definitely, it's I wouldn't say the movie's necessarily meant to, like, it's got some moments because when I watched this movie originally, it was like I think my parents rented it, and Malcolm, do you want to introduce John?
Yeah, I was getting. I was scared. I'll let you finish, but yeah. We've got it. Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say that I agree with Dan that if you look at that 1999 Best Picture lineup, it's definitely I would say it's a toss-up between Sixth Sense and Green Mile, for which one I think has aged the best in terms of being in audiences' minds and being a classic. I understand where you're coming from in saying that you wish it was a tied supporting actor, and I think that they would have been worthy winners. But for me, it's still Tom Cruise in Magnolia. That still would have been my personal win.
But Frank T.J. Mack is incredible. No, Frank T.J. Mack is incredible.
And it's unfortunate that Magnolia didn't get into picture because it's one of my favorite movies ever. But But yeah, I'm sick. This is a really good pick, and I can see why I got into picture because and that twist is crazy because I didn't see it coming. I mean, granted, I saw this as a first time as a kid, so but I agree with everything you guys said. It's worthy of the recognition that it got.
But yeah, we've got John Marr joining us. John, we're talking about The Sixth Sense. What are your feelings about The Sixth Sense, and how are you going?
I think The Sixth Sense is the movie that kind of like definitely put M. Night Shyamalan on the map. Obviously, I don't think he's ever reached those heights again. But Sixth Sense is like pretty close to like a really accessible horror, like near masterpiece. I think The Sixth Sense.
Yeah, but yeah, so moving on from Sixth Sense, and this is definitely one. The next one we're going to talk about is Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. John, what are your feelings about Psycho?
I think everyone who is a horror fan always comes back to Psycho. A lot of the tropes that we see still in horror do owe a lot to Hitchcock's Psycho, I would say. How many times has the whole like split personality, murderer, the guy who you think is the murderer actually is the psychopath? Yeah, totally. I mean, even though it's an adapted movie, in the realm of cinema, it's been done a ton of times, and I believe it's the fact that Psycho is so iconic that we have all those other films that came after. Even Gus Van Sant Psycho to thank. We thank Psycho for that.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, just like this is one that in doing this research, I was surprised to learn. I mean, I did part of this research like a while ago when we did a ranking episode on movies that should have been nominated for the Oscars. Like, I'm surprised that Psycho was not nominated for Best Picture. Like, it was nominated for Best Director, Supporting Actress, Art Direction, Black and White, and Cinematography, Black and White. Like, it wasn't nominated for Best Picture. It wasn't nominated for Best Actor, which are two things that I think it really should have been nominated for. And yeah, this is one that, and I don't get how it can be nominated for Best Director but not pictured. That is always a really.
I mean, it's a pretty rough year to be in the Best Picture run. Yeah. I mean, The Apartment I think is way better than Psycho. I'll put that out there. Yeah, it's a rough year to be in the conversation.
The Apartment's my favorite movie from that year, so I see what I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, having seen The Apartment finally, I agree, but like it's one of those ones like looking at the other ones that were nominated for in that year. Like you had The Alamo, you had Alma Gantry, you had Sons and Lovers, and The Sundowners. The other four movies no one talks about, and I get it. Like in this community, like everyone is more about the recent stuff, but for being nominated for Best Picture, you'd think that all five of those would still be talked about. And it's one of those ones when you go through some of these early years, like a lot of them are either unable to be found anywhere or they just don't get talked about it. So it's one of those ones like, the Psycho could have easily been in that five. I mean, whether or not it won, I'm not sure why, but the fact it wasn't nominated is what I was surprised about. But Dan, what are your thoughts about Psycho?
Yeah, going back on what you just said, Mark, I think Hollywood just didn't like Hitchcock movies. They weren't ready for his type of suspense thrillers or horror films, however you want to describe them. And I think the fans, the people wanted to see their movies, but the Oscar, the Academy, the voting, which were a bunch of hoity-toity old white guys at the time, and it didn't change for maybe the last 5 or 6 years. Before it was still a bunch of hoity-toity old white guys. Maybe that's why we got the lineup we got in 1999. Who knows? But I think this is a absolute masterpiece. It's when you talk about Alfred Hitchcock's one of my favorite directors, top 4. I think he's in my top 4 or 5 directors of all time on my personal list. And I think Psycho, it's right there for me with North by Northwest as my favorite. of his. I think it edges North by Northwest out. I think it's an absolute masterpiece. I think I love the show on A&E. It spawned a show on A&E, which I thought was great. The Bates Hotel. I thought that show was incredible. Don't bring up the damn Gus Van Sant movie ever again. I think that's a piece of garbage. I mean, you don't remake classics, and you don't remake classics scene for scene in a modern it's dumb. It makes no sense. Gus Van Sant had no sense. That movie had no sense of aesthetic. You forget when this movie was made, and it's. I mean, people had been watching movies for 50 years since this movie came out. Halloween has come out since then. Friday the 13th had come out since then. So you can't do Psycho 50 years later and think, oh, okay, it's going to hold. Oh, Gus Van, that was dumb. Stupid decision on Gus Van Sant. But I love Psycho. I think it's incredible. Lewis, take it away.
Yeah, Lewis, what are your thoughts about Psycho?
Well, obviously one of Hitchcock's best and one of the best films from 1960. I think I have it at number 3 in 1960. I'd only rank like The Apartment and House of Usher over it because I'm such a massive Vincent Price stan. But and I will say, and a ballsy movie because remember, the main protagonist at the beginning of this movie, it ends up being a victim. And that really surprised a lot of people, which led to, I think when the movie came out, Alfred made sure that you weren't allowed in the theater as soon as the movie started because he didn't want the twist to start coming out. And, I will say, in terms of the conversation, why didn't it get into picture? I do think had there been 10, it definitely would have probably got into picture. But if you look at Hitchcock's record into getting to the Best Picture race, earlier on, particularly during the 40s, he was actually almost always getting his movies into the picture race. And then something seemed to happen. There's some kind of shift that happened sort of in the 50s where he would show up in director, but the movie didn't necessarily get loved to get into picture. I mean, I believe he got a director nomination for Rear Window as well, and that didn't get into picture. So I don't know if it was because a little bit of a change of some of the younger members that were coming in at the time. But it's unfortunate because it's definitely a movie that would have aged so well had it been nominated for Best Picture. I mean, granted, The Apartment won, and that's aged incredibly well. But this is a big misstep by the Academy not to nominate this for picture.
And I want to say real quick that Vertigo is actually my favorite Hitchcock film, not Psycho. Vertigo. Okay.
But yeah, moving on to what I think was the first horror movie that got nominated for picture, and some people might want to think it doesn't have a sequel out at the moment. But it's the late William Friedkin's The Exorcist. It was a juggernaut at the Oscars. Like, it was nominated for picture, director, actress, supporting actress, best screenplay based on material from another medium, which it won that one. Art direction, cinematography, editing, and sound, which it also won sound. But this is one of those ones. Like, I will say it's labeled as the scariest movie ever made. Like, I watched it 2 days. Like, it's fine. It's one of those ones. Like, just with the fact that I've seen like some really scary movies, like it's just doesn't have that same effect to me now. Maybe though, if I'd watched it back then, maybe. But yeah, it's just a really good movie. Just like everything, the shots and all that, and I think Linda Blair is definitely a big standout in this. Like, she definitely deserved that actress, supporting actress nomination. And yeah, but Dan, what are your thoughts about The Exorcist?
Yeah, I did a review, 50th anniversary review of this about a month ago or so. The more you watch The Exorcist, the more you appreciate what William Friedkin was trying to do. I mean, this is so far before its time, this kind of movie was, and it really spawned so many movies of this ilk afterwards. And I'll be honest with you. I think the score is incredible, and I love Max von Sydow in this. I think I've seen him in a couple Swedish films before this, obviously Seven Seal and some other things, but he really became an actor where American audiences got to know who he was, and he became a great actor in our eyes after this. He was always a great actor in the Swedish country because that's where he's from, Sweden. But Ellen Burstyn, incredible. I loved her in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, the Martin Scorsese film. And I just think it has held up, which is amazing. For a 1973 movie, this thing is held up tremendously. I'm shocked this thing has held up tremendously as well as it has.
Yeah. But Luis, what are your thoughts about The Exorcist?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't logged a list of my 1973 watches yet, but I think, off the top of my head, this might be my favorite movie that came out that year. I rewatched this movie for the first time in like 2 or 3 years in preparation to see the new Exorcist movie, and this really is a great horror film, and because it's got scary moments, it's got disturbing moments, but it's also got the character arcs. It's so it makes these people feel real, down to the priest who's having a battle within himself with faith and the issues that he had in terms of what happened with his mother and such, and the way that the movie just scares you by even with the little thing like when she starts talking like the homeless man that he bumped into earlier in the movie, as he was looking to see evidence that she was possessed. I think that this movie, I honestly think it may have finished second at the Oscars, because I think that's the year that I lost to The Sting, I want to say, because that was the in between the Godfather years. Mm-hmm. And I think ultimately The Sting just ended up being a little bit more of a crowd friendlier movie, and that probably helped it rise above Exorcist. And not to start getting into Oscar history, but this thing was one of those like late surgers that kind of came out of nowhere at the end there. This is one of the absolute best Best Picture nominations again. And one of the all-time horror films, and I think it should. I personally, in my opinion, it should have won Best Picture that year.
And John, what are your thoughts about The Exorcist?
I think Luis's assessment is pretty good. I mean, The Exorcist is incredibly ahead of its time. I think it is lauded as one of the scariest movies, just because the realm of horror that we were in the early 70s, like craziness, like a child actor cursing out a priest, like the things that you would never see outside of like grindhouse exploitation movies that weren't getting wide releases. The Exorcist kind of gave you a taste of like what was to come, but did it, even though it's pretty crass material, actually did it tastefully to the point that the Academy recognized it so much. So like The Exorcist is incredibly influential because it made it safer for movies that came after it to take those risks. And then how good is The Exorcist? Well, the fact that The Exorcist Believer didn't ruin the legacy of The Exorcist tells you all you need to know about how great The Exorcist is. Because Exorcist Believer, do not watch that movie. That movie's horrible.
Yeah, and I want to just make one more point real quick, Malcolm. I have friends that actually were alive back then and saw this movie in theaters. And one of the legacies of a good horror movie is the fact that people were running out of theaters left and right. They were so scared by this movie, they were literally running out of the theaters by what was on the screen. And that, to me, tells you how great a horror movie is, because if people are so scared they're running out of the theater, that means it's doing its job.
Moving on, I've got a couple ones that were just kind of like have been nominated at least once I thought to talk about. We've got A Quiet Place, which was nominated for it was either sound editing or sound mixing, but it lost to Bohemian Rhapsody, which I think is a travesty, because the fact that A Quiet Place is about like sound or the absence of sound. Like, I think is the way it was done really well. I think it should have at least won, and I mean, I'd argue that it should have been nominated to some other areas as well. But yeah, Dan, what are your thoughts about A Quiet Place?
I love A Quiet Place. I mean, I had to drive to Tampa twice to see A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place Part 2 because they weren't screening them in Orlando. But it was worth the drive because these movies are incredible. I cannot wait for the spinoff. I can't wait for the sequel. Give me these Quiet Place movies right now. John Krasinski just has a feel for this world that he has created, and I want more of it. And I love that movie so much. I think it was an incredible movie.
Lewis, what are your thoughts about A Quiet Place?
I think, you mentioned that this only ended up getting a sound nomination, didn't even win. I think this is one of the best examples of where the genre bias shows up, because this movie, there were some critics that tried to push this movie, and I believe it showed up in the AFI top 10 that year. So it wasn't like the movie was like, easy for the Academy not to pay attention to. So I think that there was clear bias there that didn't recognize this movie more than it did, because it was a big hit. I think it's going to end up. There's already signs that it's become a modern mainstream horror classic. And with the sequels and such, I know friends who can't wait to join Dan in watching these the spin-off and the third one that's coming up. I think Krasinski's shown himself to be a competent and good director with what he did here. So I think this is a good movie. I don't think I love it as much as other people do, but it is a solid film. And I think, now that I think about it, after Malcolm was laying out what happened to it at the Academy, I think this is one of the great examples of how the genre bias can cost a movie. Because it's not like critics didn't try to give this movie love, and it's not like the Academy didn't know it existed.
Yeah, and I mean, it's one like, whether or not it was genre bias or whether the critics just really like the sound mixing in that last half an hour of Bohemian Rhapsody. Who knows? But John,
don't bring up how good Bohemian Rhapsody did, because that just annoys me.
I think the real test of A Quiet Place, I love A Quiet Place too. Quiet Place had A Quiet Place too. I think John Krasinski did a fantastic job with it. I think the real test for John Krasinski will be like once he moves out of the Quiet Place world he's built. If he directs another like smash hit horror movie, they're going to start talking about him like he's Jordan Peele, like he's Ari Aster. I think he has the ability, if he could follow this up, because the world building he's done in The Quiet Place. And I have to agree with what Malcolm said at the outset. The fact that you can build, it's actually like even experimental in a sense that, like, it is a movie based around silence, and the way that you have the deaf daughter and the aliens. The sound editing and the sound mixing in this movie is actually incredible if you put it against a sense. Like, it's really a movie that has very little going on purpose. So I think it should have gotten more of a nod in the fact that they had a successful experiment in that field.
Yeah, and the second one wasn't even nominated for sound, which but was just even more bizarre. But yeah, moving on to another one that only just got one nomination. It's the Stephen King adaptation Misery. It only got the nomination for Kathy Bates. I want to say it's best. It was best actress. It's another one I haven't seen, so I can't really talk about it. But Dan, what are your thoughts about Misery?
Yeah, I'll tell you right now, that year, 1990, what an interesting year for the Academy Awards. I mean, they nominated some interesting films for Best Picture that year that we all look at, and we've had this discussion yesterday on Rank 'Em, but like Godfather Part 3, Dances with Wolves wins Best Picture, Best Director for Kevin Costner, and Misery doesn't even get into, I think, isn't it 90? Misery doesn't even get into the Best Picture race. I mean, Kathy Bates is incredible. James Caan is incredible in this movie. one of the best, next to The Shining, I would say, are the two best adaptations of a Stephen King novel. And I mean, come on, Academy. What are you doing? I mean, at least you gave Kathy Bates the Academy Award for Best Actress. She was amazing in this role. I mean, a lot of people hadn't heard of her before this, but yeah, she's had a good long career, which I'm glad for. You know, and she's been nominated. She was nominated for, wasn't it was she nominated the one with the Atlanta bombings, Malcolm? Was she nominated?
Richard Jewell.
Yeah, Richard Jewell. I thought she hadn't been nominated in many, many years, and she got into that one. So the Academy does love Kathy Bates, so that's good. I'm glad about that. But yeah, I don't know what they were thinking with Misery, Malcolm. If I got any of my facts wrong, please correct me.
Well, I mean, I will say, I haven't seen Dance with Wolves, so I can't really talk on that. But I have seen the other four, and I think Awakenings, Ghost, Godfather Part 3, and Goodfellas, I think they're all really good. I think they deserve the nomination as well. So I think Misery getting into picture was always going to be hard. If it was 10, I could see it definitely getting in. But Lewis, what are your thoughts about Misery?
I got to tell you, I'm shocked that it only got one nomination. Like when you said that, I mean, I just had assumed, especially since Kathy Bates won, that it maybe showed up elsewhere. I you know, that's surprising to me because I think it's one of the better films of that year. And I do think 1990 was a pretty good year for movies. So I mean, that surprised me. I mean, it's definitely one of the better Stephen King adaptations. And a worthy win by Kathy, and definitely a big win for horror that it was able to win that big Oscar for her there.
John, what are your thoughts about Misery?
Yeah, I'm surprised. Yeah, given what say, I mean, Kathy Bates winning the Oscar is great. She was great in that role. It's a very difficult role to play, to be honest. Having read the book, surprised there wasn't a nod for best adapted screenplay for Misery. At least, you know, if you're. Or, you know, and even I wouldn't have hated Rob Reiner getting a nod for director for that movie either. I definitely wouldn't have hated it. Definitely top tier Stephen King. Everything, you know, honestly, it's kind of, you're looking at it against the pantheon of Stephen King adaptations. Wasn't hard to stand out, but it really smashed it at that point in time. And then all the other great Stephen King adaptations kind of came after Misery. So it kind of like did allow people to start taking that work seriously. So Misery is pretty pivotal in like the whole, you know, chronology of Stephen King adaptations, I'd say.
Yeah, looking at the nominations for adapted screenplay, I think you could have probably got Misery in there because like Dance with Wolves, Awakenings, and Goodfellas were all nominated, which I think are well deserved. Then you had The Grifters and Reversal of Fortune, which I don't know too much about. To be honest,
that's a great movie. I can't hate it.
Yeah, I've heard good things about Reversal of Fortune, and yeah, so. But yeah, moving on to the last three I've got on my list. I don't know if Dan's got any I haven't talked about, but there is some that people do consider horror. I'm not sold on them being horror personally, but just because they are more. Some of them are more psychological thrillers to me, and just don't have the horror thing. I mean, one that is probably real life horror, especially if you're swimming, and that is Jaws. And like that was like that won 3 awards, like it won sound, film editing, it won best original score and best sound. It was also nominated for best picture. And apparently Spielberg really hated the fact he wasn't nominated for best director.
There's video proof of that, by the way. You could go on YouTube right now and watch him react to getting snubbed.
Yeah. But Louis, what are your thoughts about Jaws?
Well, I mean, this is like probably my at least top 25, if not top 20 all-time favorite movies. And as great as Schindler's List, Jurassic Park, Saving Private Ryan are, this is my personal favorite Spielberg film. I watch this movie every July 4th. I love this movie so freaking much because every single time I watch it, even though I watch it at least once every year, I'm always taken aback about, you know, you go into it and it's so easy to just say, oh, it's a movie about these shark eating people. And then you watch the movie and you realize that the way that it feels like a real town. I mean, like there are scenes where people are talking over each other. The pressure that the sheriff is getting from the town, the mayor, and I mean, like I like to joke around on social media that he was just trying to help the economy, but you know the pressure and the questions about the competency of the mayor with how he handles it when they go out to sea. They didn't just go straight to the final, you know, confrontation. They let it build up and build up, and I mean, look, 1975 is one of the all-time best aged Best Picture lineups. But with all due respect to those movies, I think Jaws should have won Best Picture that year. You know, no disrespect to, you know, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That's a great film. But Jaws, for me, is my favorite movie from 1975, my favorite Spielberg movie, one of my all-time favorite movies. This is, out of all the horror movies that have been nominated for Best Picture, this is easily like my favorite, you know. So yeah, I just can't say enough good things about this movie. I love Jaws.
John, what are your thoughts about Jaws?
Jaws is pretty iconic. Yeah, I mean, I definitely should have been nominated for Best Picture. I have a soft spot for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I don't know if I could put Jaws over that. I love the novel, love the movie. But yeah, Jaws is, I mean, how influential has Jaws been? Right? Just think about it. Everything about that movie. Like, the characters are quotable. The score is hummable. You remember things about Jaws. It sticks with you. And just the fact that, like, they're still putting out shark movies that are basically Jaws. They're still doing it, you know, and people are still going to see it. So everybody has Steven Spielberg and Peter Benchley to thank for that. So good on them.
It's one of those ones like just sort of reading up what is nominated for.
Did you get nominated for Best Picture?
Oh
What?
yeah. I never said it didn't get nominated for Best Picture. It didn't win Best Picture, is what they were saying.
Well, it got snubbed for director. I think that's what it's. That's what Malcolm mentioned.
No director. Go ahead, Malcolm.
It's one of those ones like personally I'm not as high on Jaws as everyone else is, but it's one of those ones like I think it deserved the nominations it got, and I do think it's a good movie, but yeah, like some of the just going over there, like I don't know if I'm surprised just because of how they did the shark. I'm surprised it did not get art direction, which was what production design was at the time. And then I'm also surprised it didn't get like best adapted screenplay because like just looking at the list, like outside of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Barry Lyndon's, like the other three, like The Man Who Would Be King, Profumo di Donna, and Sunshine Boys, I don't know what they are, and I'm surprised. I think Jaws should have been in that box.
Also, with all due respect to anybody who likes the book, this is one of the extremely rare cases that I actually do think the movie's better than the book.
Yeah, well, I mean, I haven't read the book, so I can't compare. But I mean, I would argue if the movie is better than the book, it should be considered best adapted screenplay. So I mean,
and by the way, I think there's this crazy. I mean, not to cut you off, Malcolm, but I did want to bring up. I believe the cinematographer of Jaws was also the cinematographer in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I could have swore I saw that stat.
Oh, I mean, I can believe it. Bull Butler was the screenplay in both. He was also the cinematography in 3 of the Rocky movies as well. At least the sequences was 2, 3, and 4. But Dan, what are your thoughts about Jaws?
Yeah, I mean, you know, this is saying, you know, I kind of bring it up a lot, and you know, we all know the saying blockbuster. Well, how that phrase was formed was because of Jaws. Jaws had people lining up around the block down the street for this movie. And then you also have sayings like, I did not want to go in the water anymore after watching Jaws. So when you have things like that have created this fervor around a movie, it just shows you how big of a hit this thing was, and how, there's actually a play that's making fun of the shark and the whole thing about how the shark didn't work and all this stuff. I'd love to see it. But supposedly the son of Richard Dreyfuss says whoever's portraying him is not doing him justice or something. They're making him look like a fool in the play or something. So he's all pissed off, Richard Dreyfuss is. But I think I'm right with Lewis. I try to watch it every summer. I think I grew up in New England, so I grew up around a couple beaches, Hampton Beach and Salisbury Beach in Hampshire, Massachusetts. So that whole feel of what Jaws was going for at Amity Island was basically, they filmed it in Rhode Island. And I love this movie. I think it's a great movie. It's not my favorite Spielberg film because I have a few other ones above Jaws, but I completely appreciate the fact that this is Lewis's favorite, and it's a lot of people I know's favorite horror movie, favorite movie of all time. So it tells you how this movie has stood the test of time. 50 years, almost 50. We're up to 50 something years.
48 years now.
Yeah, we're almost up to 50 years. This movie came out. That was getting close. That's crazy, right?
Yeah. But yeah, there was a few other ones that got nominated. As I said, some that I consider. Those are some of the major ones that we got nominated. There are things like Black Swan, Fatal Attraction, they were both sort of as I said, those are ones. I haven't seen Fatal Attraction. I've seen the TV series, and to me that is not so much horror than thriller to me, but it is what it is. But I'm going to move on to movies that we think definitely should have gotten some love. There are definitely a lot of good horror movies out there that really and as Louis said, the Academy is really biased when it comes to genres, as it is. Horror and comic book movies both don't really get a lot of love. Well, yes, with comic book movies, it's one of those ones that it's really hard to get them in anywhere because they're so popcorny or theme park rides, as good old Marty would like to say. But I'm going to go in reverse order here, and I'll kick things off here. I didn't really come up with a lot that I can, but one of the big ones that I think, for me, didn't get a lot of love that I think should have. I think there's an argument to say that I think, was it Bill Skarsgård that was Pennywise in the It movies?
Yeah, Bill
yeah. I knew it was Skarsgård. I just always don't remember which one it was. But I think there's an argument to think that I think Bill Skarsgård I think is really good in It. I think there's definitely an argument he should have been. I don't know if he would have been supporting or lead. I think it would be more supporting than anything for It. But regardless, I think he should have got an acting nomination for It. And yeah, and I've already talked about some of the other ones. I think Anthony Perkins should have been nominated for lead actor for Psycho. I think Bruce Willis should have been nominated for lead actor for The Sixth Sense. And yeah, but John, any sort of horror movies in the past that, without talking about 2023, because that will be the last thing we'll be talking about, but any horror movies in the past you think should have got some Oscar nominations?
Let's talk about Mia Goth not getting nominated for Pearl, or Toni Collette not being nominated for Hereditary, or Florence Pugh not getting nominated for Midsommar. Just to name a few. There's a lot of really great, strong lead actress performances, especially in modern horror, that just it's like they don't exist. I think Daniel Kaluuya got the nod for Get Out and everything, but there's definitely more that could have broken through, I feel. as far as like best picture, I get it. Like I'm not going to sit here and like wax poetic about movies that never had a shot of going for best picture. That's just personal thing. But I do think, especially in the era of elevated horror, or even if we go like either one of the guys in The Lighthouse could have got a best lead actor nod. I think those are two great performances too. And yeah, then we'll get into what's going on this year. There's definitely some things I would talk about this year, but we'll come back to that. But all of these newer A24 indie, semi-indie horror movies have great performances in them that nobody talks about.
Yeah, I mean, just to touch on your point about Florence Pugh, I think with that year, I think Florence Pugh was in a really good position where no matter what she got nominated for, she was going to get a nomination for something. Whether it was she is great in Little Women, but I do remember that year I was making the argument like, yeah, I think Florence Pugh could be one of those ones that get double nominated, but it wasn't the case. But Lewis, anything you think should have been nominated?
Yeah, I agree with Skarsgård because I really do love that adaptation of it. It's one of my favorite movies from a really stacked 2017. And Mia Goth is definitely a big one. I mean, she was on my personal ballot last year, and it annoyed the heck out of me that they didn't become a thing. She had such an amazing performance. That monologue is freaking nuts. I can't believe she freaking pulled that off. I am so proud of the fact that one of the two critic groups that I belong to, Puerto Rico Critics Group, we did nominate her for Best Actress. I think that's really cool that we did that. And I will say that I'll bring up, the Universal monster movies have aged so well as these classic films from the 30s and 40s. And Bride of Frankenstein and how influential that movie is. I mean, that movie shows up in Sight and Sound polls. And it's a shame that movie, I think it only got like one random tech nom, I believe. I think it got a sound nomination. That movie really should have gotten a lot more love than it did, and I think history has proven that. But sticking to Universal Monsters, I think Bela Lugosi's greatest performance was not necessarily as the Count, but as Igor in Son of Frankenstein. His performance in that movie is absolutely nuts, how great it is. I mean, the way that he walks and talks and really portrays that character and disappears into that character. I think people should talk a lot more about what an incredible performance that is by Bela Lugosi. And Boris Karloff, I've always told people, go and watch the Frankenstein movies where Boris Karloff does not portray the monster, and you'll really appreciate his performance as the monster. So I mean, so I would say that that's what really stands out to me. I really wish the Universal horror movies got more love than they did in some major categories. Mia Goth definitely stands out to me, and Skarsgård, I agree with that as well. So yeah, I mean, you could go throughout history and look at a lot of horror films. I mean, I'm again bringing up John Carpenter's The Thing. I mean, now granted, I understand why, because when that movie came out, it didn't get the acclaim that it has now. But yeah, I mean, we could pick apart so many horror movies that if the Academy look back on it, they're probably kicking themselves in the foot that they didn't go ahead and give more recognition to some of these movies than they did.
Yeah, Bride of Frankenstein only got a nomination for sound recording that year. And yeah, just looking at the nominations in that year, like there's a lot of movies nominated for best picture, what it was known for outstanding production. And I've not seen any of the Universal monster movies, but the fact that Bride of Frankenstein was not one of the, I think there's about 11 or 10. There's a lot there. Was not one of them is surprising. Like, no, who's here talking about things like Top Hat or the Broadway Melody of 1936 these days?
Well, that's just an example of. Sometimes it takes time to see how a movie ages, because when the Universal Monster movies came out, I could see that they were just seen as these genre films, popcorn flicks for people to go see. But as time has gone on, again, Bride of Frankenstein is showing up in Sight and Sound polls. It's not. I'm not just saying a mainstream movie here. This is a very well respected film.
Yeah, no, I don't get that. But Dan, like anything that you think should have been nominated?
First of all, Malcolm, I know you said you weren't going to bring up Black Swan, but Natalie Portman wins Best Actress for Black Swan. And Ruth Green wins, I think, Best Supporting Actress for Rosemary's Baby, if I'm not mistaken, is the neighbor across the hall. She's funny as hell in that. She is so funny in that. But I just want to bring up those two that weren't mentioned. I have a list. I have a list of 10, actually, Malcolm, that I think are egregious nominees. Potential nominees for horror movies, and the first one to me is one of the most egregious of all is Jeff Goldblum in The Fly. I mean, I don't understand how Jeff Goldblum does not get nominated for Best Actor in The Fly. Two people from The Shining, Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall from The Shining. I don't understand how either one of those. I would say probably Best Actor, Best Supporting Actress there. We mentioned Jaws, but Robert Shaw. How does this guy not get nominated for Best Supporting Actor? He gives a great performance in this movie, the monologue about the Indianapolis and all that kind of stuff. Bring it back to what Lewis said. Boris Karloff, I think Boris Karloff as Frankenstein is incredible. Elsa Lanchester as the bride is incredible. Lupita Nyong'o in Us, I think, is an egregious snub, in my opinion. She was amazing in Us. Obviously, we've somebody brought it up. Toni Collette in Hereditary. What are they doing? Not nominating Toni Collette in Hereditary. We got you mentioned Anthony Perkins in Psycho. A personal favorite of mine, and you could say whatever you want, but I think a guy who gives a lot of emotion, who brings a lot to the character, and who really becomes this duo character of Lawrence Talbot and the Wolfman, and that's Lon Chaney Jr. I freaking love Lon Chaney in the Wolfman. I love him in High Noon. I just think Lon Chaney Jr. is a great actor. His father, they called him the Man of 1,000 Faces. He was an incredible actor. If you haven't seen that film, Man of 1,000 Faces, or some of those classic silent horror films with Lon Chaney, I recommend you see those. And then, Kurt Russell for the Thing. 82 was a big year for Best Actor, so I understand why he couldn't have got in for Best Actor there. So, or The Thing for Best Picture. You know, I mean, it's a horror film. So that's my list of 10 that I had.
Yeah, and I didn't actually talk about think about The Fly when I was doing the list. That did get a sole nomination that when it came out, and that was for Best Makeup, which was deserved, which really was deserved. But looking at the lineup for that Best Actor, you could have got Jeff Goldblum and you had Dexter Gordon for Around Midnight, Bob Hoskins for Mona Lisa, William Hurt for Children of a Lesser God, James Woods for Salvador, and Paul Newman for Color Money. So I mean, you could have knocked out one of them to get Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, I would say so.
But moving on. There's been a lot of good horror movies that have come out this year alone. And well, there's a good chance none of them will get any love when award season come. Partially because some of them were just released really early on in the year, and the Academy doesn't always appreciate horror as much as we do. But Dan, is there any horror movies in this year that you think should at least be considered for an Oscar nomination?
Yeah, I have one. Count them one. And that is Talk to Me. Talk to Me is one of the best films of the year. I think Sophia Wilde as Mia is incredible. Incredible. Probably Danny and Michael Philippou for maybe a screenplay, original screenplay. Adapted, it's got some heavy hitters in it. Original, maybe you could slip in Talk to Me directors as the screenplay writers, hopefully. I think they're the screenplay writers. And Sophia Wilde, I don't think she's getting into Best Actress. So unfortunately, and I don't think Talk to Me is getting into Best Picture, but I think it's the best horror movie of the year, bar none. I've seen quite a bit, some bad ones, some good ones, some great, but there's none of them that even come close to Talk to Me, in my opinion. These are Australian filmmakers, and I think this is an Australian film, and I think it's an incredible film, but it's not going to get any nominations. I just have they're just not going to go in the horror genre this year, I feel. But that's the best one, in my opinion.
Lewis, what 23 movies from this year do you think should be not considered?
Well, I'll tell you what. Cillian Murphy should be worried about Josh Hutcherson in Five Nights at Freddy's. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. Well, I'm gonna bring up a movie that I personally wasn't too crazy about, but I would really like to see it get some recognition in cinematography, and not just because I mentioned it when we did the cinematography episode, but El Conde. That definitely has horror elements to it. I would really like to see that get some cinematography love. This is not going to happen, and I thought the movie was okay, but Dave Bautista continues to be such a good actor, and I think his performance in Knock at the Cabin. Yeah, I'm trying to make sure I get the title right. Knock at the Cabin. His performance really stood out to me, and it's just, to me, out of all the wrestlers turned movie stars, actors. I mean, like you know what, John. As much as I enjoy them in some stuff, John Cena and The Rock are more movie stars. I think Dave Bautista is trying to make sure that he's an actual actor. Yeah. I really liked his performance in that film. And last movie I'm going to mention here, I don't think it's technically eligible to get Oscar contention. I think it would be necessary more for like Emmys. But No One Will Save You. The sound work in that movie, considering that people don't really talk in that film, I could respect, even though I personally was kind of mixed on the film. So I would say those are the ones that stand out to me right now in terms of horror for 2023. Last point in terms of Talk to Me, I agree with you, Dan. I don't think the Academy is going to give it love. I would be very interested to see if critics do try to push some love for it, though, because that is a very well-reviewed movie.
And I agree with your point about no one. What's it called? What's the alien?
No One Will Save You.
Yeah. And No One Will Save You. I forget. I freaking love that movie. I love Caitlin Dever. That is Emmy potential for an Emmy for best made for TV movie next year.
So on that note, I actually quickly looked it up. It was released in theaters. And it is the New York and LA Fairs. I don't know how long it was there for, but it did have a theatrical release. So I think there could be a chance it could be eligible then. Look, it's one of those times when it comes to streaming only movies, it's tricky. Because
Prey and Weird, we know went to streaming that year before, and they both got Emmy noms. So that's
there's the thing. I don't think because of COVID, I don't think Prey got a theatrical release though. As I said, No One Will Save You. It was premiered in theaters in New York and LA. It's that one. This one is a tricky one because, well, yes, it is typically a streaming movie. It did get the New York and theatrical release, so it's.
But I was sorry, Malcolm. But I was just gonna say, even if it's eligible, I do think it's a long shot.
Well, yeah. I mean, it could. Yeah, it's one of those ones like if it gets anything, it would probably be sound anyway. But John, what movies from this year do you think should be considered for Oscars?
I mean, yeah, Talk to Me. I'll talk about first. I mean, like, it's not my favorite horror movie of the year. It's number 3 for me. I really, it's a long shot. I think it definitely deserves recognition, but I think it's going to get blanked. I think if our best shots are like other types of things. I think Joaquin Phoenix's performance in Beau is Afraid deserves a Best Lead Actor nod, 100%. He killed it in that movie. Another long shot, I think, might be. I think I'd love to see Last Voyage of Demeter get an art direction nod. That'd be great because I think the set pieces in that movie are fantastic. And then another long shot, like my number 2 horror movie of the year was Birth Rebirth. Maren Ireland's fantastic in that movie. I'd like to see her get a Best Lead Actress nod for that. And then probably my favorite horror movie of the year, When Evil Lurks. I'd love to see get a Best International Feature nod. If Argentina puts that in, that'd be a good shot to maybe win an Oscar there. And if Peru puts in Hosera the Bone Woman, you might get 2 if the Academy's feeling good about nominating 2 South American horror movies for Oscars. But those are probably the only things we might see at the Oscars, I think.
Yeah. It's one of those ones like I love Talk to Me, and I mean it's one of those ones like I would like. Even though I don't think it will get like Best Picture or that, I think if it sneaks in anywhere, I think Best Original Screenplay could be a shot there. Because that concept is just really good. Well, it's essentially kind of based on around a whole bunch of this, also this possession stuff has been sort of overdone. I think it's just a really good, tight script and all that. Some other ones
well edited. I think Talk to Me is really well edited, especially the scenes like when the possession scenes. Another long shot editing from Talk to Me I could maybe see.
Oh yeah, and then some other ones which I definitely don't think will happen, but it will be crazy if it would be. Wouldn't it be crazy if Saw 10 is the first Saw movie to be nominated for an Oscar?
What, Malcolm?
Saw 10. It's the first Saw movie where Tobin Bell actually acts and has a character arc. But I don't think the strength of that character arc is going to carry it to any Oscars or nomination.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm actually being serious here. Like, this Saw movie is on a whole, like, I like the set designs and all of them. So I think, once again, I think there's a lot of good contenders for set design alone anyway. But I think the Saw movies are really good with the set design and the design of the traps and all that. So I think that but then yeah.
There's another horror movie where the only good thing is the set design. The Nun 2 had great set design, horrible everything else. So like we can go with that too.
Yeah, I mean, like, but I don't think it's going to happen. But I really enjoyed Megan and Scream 6. It would be nice to see them get some sort of love, but they're definitely not. They're also really early on in the year too. And another one that I think could be possible because it's not strictly a horror movie, but it's horror adjacent, and that's A Haunting in Venice. Because from what I've heard about the book it's based on, because apparently the book Halloween Party is, people say it's one of the worst Agatha Christie Poirot books. But the way they adapted that story, they actually streamlined it and condensed it and made it more palatable. And so I think maybe an adapted screenplay nominated for Haunting in Venice isn't too out of the realm of possibility. Partially because yes, it is horror, but it's also a mystery and all that as well. It's a mixture of genres, and I think that's one of the big things that I've seen as a trend, and especially with some of the ones we've talked about today. Is like, I think some of the horror movies that do get a lot of success at the Oscars are the ones that have elements of other genres, because I think Murder on the Orient Express, the remake, did get some nomination. Well, I'm not saying it's a horror movie, but yeah, but yeah, it's one of those ones. Like, I thought it was just fun to take a break from talking about potential stuff that could be nominated to stuff that is we think is good. Louis, what are you going to say?
Oh yeah, sorry, Malcolm, but it just I can't believe I forgot about this. But I don't think this is going to be an Oscar contender necessarily. But I'm look, and I haven't seen the movie yet. But if you count the upcoming Godzilla -1 film, just because it's going to be, it seems like it's going to be one of those darker adaptations where Godzilla's, the bad guy and such. I think the visual effects on it look pretty good for that movie, and it would be interesting because the last live-action Japanese Godzilla film, Shin Godzilla, actually won the Japanese version of their Academy Awards Best Picture because it's such a dark film, like the way the first original is. And from what I'm hearing, this movie's going to be just as dark. So, I mean, I don't think the Academy's going to touch it for obviously. I mentioned it's a very late breaker, and it's an international film that is not being pushed by Japan. Japan's submission's perfect days. But I think it would be very interesting to see if this movie, because it is a horror adjacent, can pull off the success that the previous Godzilla film, Shin Godzilla, did and be a player in the Japanese Academy Prize. So that's one that sticks up to me in terms of a potential any future horror films that we still got coming out. I could see that one potentially being a more of a prestige contender, but obviously, unfortunately, not in this country.
Yeah, and it's one of those ones like because some of the other horror movies that have come out like. Five Nights at Freddy's, I don't think it's got a chance to be nominated anywhere.
No, and not to mention I mean, if there's a horror bias and genre bias, and of course it's going to be a bias and not to touch another Godzilla film. So
yeah, but yeah,
and I have one more thing I was going to say real quick. I forgot. I wanted to mention Colin Clive. Colin Clive, I think, would do really good. Best supporting actor potential for Dracula. I think he's from Dracula, but also, don't
you mean Dwight Frye?
Dwight Frye. Did I say Colin Clive?
I think Colin Clive played Professor Frankenstein.
Yeah, okay, my bad. Dwight Frye. My fault. I'm getting my Dracula and Frankenstein supporting characters mixed up. Yeah. But it's just sad that even like a James Whale, like you're telling me James Whale didn't make some amazing films in his day, and this guy can't get a Best Director nomination. I was like rolling around in my head, Malcolm. So I figured, what the hell?
Yeah. But yeah, it was just interesting to just take a break from talking about some of this to talk about a genre that just gets overlooked a lot of the Oscars, and just fun to just take it down and just something fun to do, talk about for Halloween. But John, where can people find you talking about horror stuff?
You can go to my YouTube channel. It's right below me. Why We Love Horror, WWL Horror at YouTube. My Letterboxd is right there too, JW Moore on Letterboxd. Also over the video store, running Trivia League Unlimited. New episodes Saturdays and Sundays. Why We Love Horror drops on Thursdays on the Why We Love Horror channel, and Why We Love Horror Trivia live every Thursday night on the Why We Love Horror channel. And we'll be expanding to other programming soon. But right now we're just a fledgling channel, just finding our way. So give us a like and subscribe.
Luis, where can people find you online?
Yeah, just MendesMovieReport.com takes you straight to my 100% free Substack newsletter. You do not. No one has, unlike other Substack newsletters, no one has to pay for anything. Get weekly movie reviews. I'm trying to work on doing more classic film lists and my Oscar projections. I'm about to do an update and start expanding from just Best Picture to all the 8 above the line categories. Also, if you want to find me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter /X, Threads, Letterboxd, Mendes Movie RPT. And I just want to wish everyone who sees this a happy Halloween.
Dan, where can people find you online?
John, I just followed you on Letterboxd as we were speaking. So I just want to let you know that. Also, you can find me at my name, Dan Skipbound, on Facebook, X, Threads, Letterboxd, or any variation of DP Skipbound or From the Fourth Row on any of the social medias. Also, I'm a film critic in Orlando, Florida. I write for FromTheFourthRow.com, as you see right there. Also, DisappointmentMedia.com. I'm in the midst of a celebration of my 50 years of existence, and I'm doing a special 5-part series called My Life, My Love, 50 Years in Film, where I pick my favorite movie or movies from each year, and I do a review of that movie, and I do it in 10-year increments. And that's on my website. Also, I've been doing companion videos where I get some friends together, or just one friend and myself, and they pick their favorite movies from that given 10 years, and I pick mine. We kind of talk about it. It wouldn't be fun if I was just sitting there on YouTube picking my favorite movies from various years. It'd be much more funner when I have somebody there to banter with and talk to across the way. So I have 4 episodes of that up. I got one more episode coming before the end of the year, before I celebrate my 50th birthday. But also, I've been on the Dill Pickle Network a few times. They have a revisionist history of the Academy Awards, and they're on their show called Picture This. And I've done all 3 of the Godfather years, 72, 74, 90, and also 1980. Hopefully, I'll be back with them. They have an episode out right now where they revisit 1999. They have a great discussion about The Sixth Sense and some of those movies that we talked about. Also, I've been on the Hero Network. What's it called again? The Hero
Movie Hero Network.
The what Hero Network?
Movie Hero.
Movie Hero Network. How did I miss movie? How can I not say movie? Movie Hero Network a bunch of times, and I'll be back on there again. I had my top 64 bracket, and I've been on a bunch of other stuff with those guys. Also, I've been on with Malcolm on Rank 'em a few times. Last night, we just ranked the top 12 Martin Scorsese films, and it's the true ranking of Scorsese films, not that old list Malcolm had before. Yeah, I'm all over the place. Malcolm, I love you, buddy.
But you can find me on Playthrough Productions hosting Rank 'em every week, and next week, because it's the first week of November, we're going to do a Halloween episode. We're talking about influential horror movies. And yeah, you can also find me hosting Gone with the Wind each week. Next week, we'll be back to normal. Haven't decided what categories we'll talk about next week, but we're definitely going to be talking about the Gotham Awards that came out this week. And yeah, and you can pretty much find me sort of all over the place. Like I pop up on Movie Hero Network as well from time to time. And yeah, but until next week, keep watching movies.
A little slow tonight, isn't it?
I like that one, Malcolm. Oh man, nice to meet you, John.
I think we've been back in Full Metal